In the previous video, we were talking about the grid and how to use the grid settings, setting it up, changing colors of the grid. And in this video, I want to show you something else that I use very often, and that's using guidelines. First thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to turn off the grid. I'm going to change my color back to a white by clicking on this icon. I'm going to go to white and hit OK. And guidelines are very useful because they work vertically and horizontally, and you can line things up really nicely to it. So for instance, if I'm looking at this text at the bottom here, the land that I love, and I have this red line here, if I want it to line up perfectly with it, I will definitely use the guidelines. And guidelines are created from the ruler that goes around the design page. So if you want a horizontal guideline, you'll actually click and hold on this ruler right here and drag onto the screen. And notice that as I click and drag onto the screen that you get this dotted line. So I'm going to place it right here at the edge of this satin stitch, this red satin stitch. I'm going to do the same over here. So I'm going to click and drag one across and put one right there. Now what I have is a visual reference of where it starts and ends. So if I want this text, all of this to be perfectly in line, now it's very easy to do. Now at the same time, let's say that I want to make sure that I keep it right here on this line because I know I have the height exactly where I want it. I can click from the top ruler and drag down, and it creates a horizontal line. So I can just line it up with these dots right here, and I just put one right across the bottom. And now when I resize the text, I can make sure that I put it right into place if it gets off a little bit. The other thing that I use it very frequently for is I'm going to select this red piece. And the reason I'm selecting it is because I want to see this bounding box around the selected area. And notice that there is a dot or a square right here in the center of the selected piece. What I can do is click and drag one right to the center, and now I get a reference in the middle of the design. And this helps me to line things up as well. So I'll just show you kind of how that works as well. So the first thing that I'm going to do with these guidelines is I'm going to take this text right here, and you can see it's all grouped together. So I'm going to ungroup it. So I'm going to select this bottom text, and let's say I'm just going to click and drag from the edge. And the reason I'm going to click and drag from the bottom corner is that it'll keep the text proportional. If I just click and drag from here, it'll squish the letters together. So I'm going to click and drag and get it right to the edge. And you can see now that I have it touching the edge here and touching the edge here, but you'll also see that it changed the position of where this text was. So if I want to get the bottom of this dot right on this guideline, the best way to do this, because it's so close, is just to hit these little arrows right here. I'm just going to click down. It's just going to move it a little bit each time. The nice thing about doing it this way is that it's not going to shift it left or right. It's going to stay right in the center here. And now I can click and down. You can see that I've got it nice right down on the bottom. And so that is one great way of utilizing the guidelines. Now let's say that I actually wanted this text to be smaller. I can click and drag and make it smaller, but now I want to make sure that it is centered. That's where this vertical guideline comes into play, because I want to make it centered to this red satin stitch right here. So that's why I selected that satin and I drug a guideline right over into the middle of this. So now I have a great reference for the center. So now I can click right here to select it. I can grab it right here in this middle. There's this little X there. You can see that I have the hand position. If I move off, it goes away. I want that hand position to be there as I move. So now I can just move it into place here, and I can take a look at these lines, and I can say, okay, well, I need this to go down a little bit. And also, while I'm looking at this, I've noticed that this isn't directly on that line, so I need to go over to the right just a tad bit. Now it's perfect. So that is how you utilize these guidelines. They're very simple to do, and I can come up to this ruler, right click, and I can choose to remove the guidelines. And if I remove the guidelines, it just takes them off the screen, because sometimes it could be distracting. You're just working on something to get it lined up and then you want it to go away. All you have to do is, like I said, right click on here and choose remove guidelines, and they're gone. Now I can't just bring them back, they're gone. I would have to start over again. The last thing that I want to show you is with guidelines, the other way that you can utilize them is if you're trying to, let's say, put a box perfectly around this area or this text. So I can drag, and I want it to even touch. Okay, I can drag a couple guidelines, a couple vertical and a couple horizontal. I'm going to go right up to the top here. I'm going to find the highest point, which is right here. It's touching right there. And I'm going to come down to the bottom, and I'm going to find where it actually touches. I'm not going to go to the bottom of the dots. I'm going to come down to the lowest point, just for sake of this video. So now I have this box around. Now let's say that I wanted to actually create a running stitch around here. One of the nice things you can do is not only do you get a good reference here, but you can also choose, if I right click on this ruler again, snap to guidelines. First I'm going to uncheck snap to grid because I don't need snap to grid on. Right click, snap to guidelines. And now what will happen is the same thing of working with snap to grid. It's going to snap the moment I get close to it. It's going to snap to that grid. And it's important to have a vertical and a horizontal so that it knows where to go. So I'm going to come in here, click, I'm going to grab my running stitch, and I'm going to zoom in here just so you can see. I'm going to click right here and notice that it just put it right to that edge. I'm going to scroll down a little bit, and I'm going to come in here, same thing. If I get it off, it'll just snap it right to that grid. Snap to, or the guideline. Snap to guidelines is a very, very handy feature, and it is something that I use very often. I'm just going to come back over here, and I'm going to finish it off by clicking right here and then right mouse clicking, and you can see that I just created that running stitch, and I used the guidelines to get it exactly in line and where I wanted. So this is how you can utilize guidelines in your projects. Like I said, I use it all the time when I'm digitizing designs. I use guidelines, I use the grid, but I will turn them on and off and use them as I need to. But they're extremely helpful in creating designs. And again, to turn them off, you simply right click on the ruler and choose remove guidelines, and they go away. So I hope that you will utilize guidelines in your projects. They're easy to use, and with the snap to guideline feature, they're very handy.